Okay, it's 6 o'clock. Let's go ahead and call to order. First is Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is approval of agenda.
Mr. Chairman, before we approve the agenda, there are three things I really want to address tonight, at least three. The first would be the central improvements, and I see that's listed under L2. But I intend to raise the issue of an article that was in the Oregonian yesterday and the subject matter of that, which was what school districts are doing with kids being behind. And I don't, it would seem to me that that item and my other item, my other passion, softball and baseball facilities, would be most appropriate under board business. I know we're allowed to do pretty much whatever we want to do under that, under E, but I just wanted to disclose that. And with those disclosures, I would move approval of the agenda.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up is comments from the public. Superintendent.
We received several comments via email, 6 of them total. Public comment number 1, the commenter made 2 points concerned with censoring public comment through the superintendent's summary and concern about altering a public comment. That person has asked to meet with me, and I'll be meeting with that person. Public comment number 2, 2 points were made. They requested the board to withdraw from the Oregon School Boards Association. And in your packet, there is a proclamation that they are referring to requesting proclamation support. Public comment number 3, the commenter makes 1 point, concern about public comment process. Public comment number 4, concern about OSBA leadership, and they request the board to withdraw from the Oregon School Boards Association. Public comment number 5, again, requests the proclamation support. And again, that proclamation is in your board packet. Finally, public comment number 6 made 2 points, expressed appreciation for the health services presentation and expressed appreciation for the summer school report. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, next up is classified appreciation. I'll read the following. Proclamation recognizing Classified Employee Appreciation Day, Greater Albany Public Schools Board of Education, number 2022/23, TAC 4. Whereas the education of youth is essential to the future of our community, state, country, and world. And whereas classified employees are the backbone of our public education system. And whereas classified employees work directly with students, educators, parents, volunteers, business partners, and community members. And whereas classified employees support the smooth operation of offices, the safety and maintenance of buildings and property, and the safe transportation, healthy nutrition, and direct instruction of students. And whereas our community depends upon and trusts classified employees to serve students. And whereas classified employees with their diverse talents and true dedication nurture students throughout their school years. Now, therefore, the Greater Albany Public School Board of Directors proclaims November 16th, 2022 to be Classified Employee Appreciation Day and encourages all members of our community to join in this observance, recognizing the dedication and hard work of these individuals. adopted this 24th day of October 2022, signed by myself and attested by Andy Gardner. Next proclamation, Native American Heritage Month. Proclamation recognizing Native American Heritage Month, Greater Albany Public Schools Board of Education, number 2022/23 TAC 5. Whereas Greater Albany Public Schools honors and respects tribal nations throughout our region and our country, past, present, and future. Whereas GAPS acknowledges Native American and Indigenous peoples have lived on the land since time immemorial, and we honor that history, ancestry, contributions, and legacy as we are here to promote and respect the Indigenous heritage of the United States and Oregon. And whereas to show respect for Indigenous peoples and their sovereign nations, GAPS recognizes their enduring relationships to the land and space we inhabit and share. And whereas we are committed to the practice of teaching and acknowledging the raising awareness about histories that are often suppressed or forgotten of the vast lost or ceded swaths of land across Oregon and the nation. And whereas Greater Albany Public Schools sits on an ancestral land of the Kalapuya people as part of the Confederate Tribes of the Grand Ronde Community of Oregon, which includes over 30 tribes and bands from Western Oregon, Northern California, and Southwest Washington. And whereas it is important to acknowledge and remember those that the original stewards of the land, and whereas the school board supports providing opportunities for our Native American and Indigenous students and families to learn, partner, and celebrate their cultures, and whereas the spirit of continuing to learn more about our own ancestral connection to Oregon's first people, and whereas our community is strengthened by the support and advocacy of Indigenous and Native people that continue to live, inhabit, and still breathe in many of us here today, and whereas the school board has affirmed its position of being a safe and welcoming school district and invites everyone to reflect at some point on the places we are from and how the past intersects with the present. And whereas the school board commits to creating successful educational outcomes for our Native American and Indigenous students, now, therefore, the Greater Albany Public School Board of Directors proclaims November 1 to November 30th to be Native American Heritage Month and encourages all members of our community to offer respect and honor whose home Oregon's landscapes, land, rivers, and environment have forever been home to Native American and Indigenous students and people. Adopted this 24th day of October 22nd, signed Pete Morse, Chair, and attested by our Superintendent, Andy Gardner. One of the things that was in the public comment was a request for a proclamation on parents. That's something that we've decided that obviously we support parents. The process to get on the proclamation is to put it in, and then we'll look at it and approve it. Okay, but we're not doing that tonight. Superintendent comments.
Thank you, Chairman Morse. First things first, Halloween's coming up. We have issued guidelines for students and staff to wear costumes on Monday, October 31st. We are generally allowing costumes from students. They may wear them, provided they are in general compliance with our student dress policy. No fake blood, no references to drugs, alcohol, weapons, or other inappropriate content. And they should not imitate any particular culture, race, religion, or identity. They should not wear Halloween masks, and you must be able to put on and take off their costume independently and should be conducive to classroom learning. Building principals would make the final decision on the spot on whether a costume is in compliance. So in light of the fact that students are in a public place when they're at school, as long as they are not disruptive, we would allow that freedom to occur. We will have harvest parties, and in general, we recognize that the last hour of a given day on Halloween or the day before Christmas would be a time for parties. We would not generally want them to be one religion focused, and Javier has a sheet of recommendations for some of the names that you could use for such a party to make it more inclusive of students of all faiths. Moving on, we had a meeting the other night on our food service evaluation committee. Case Bowman was present. Eric was present. Brad stopped in after bargaining. And Chris Fasha from Cascade School District, as well as two parents, Tina Dodge and Heather Medina. I think it was a smart set of people to put in the room to do that, and we will update you as we move forward. We intend to visit Corvallis schools, take a meal there and try to understand their program. And Chris Fasha, formerly the state commodities manager for ODE, I think can help us to understand the contract and what it will help us to do. And I think that we could end up with some really good work coming out of that. Jane, Heather, and I met today with EduStaff. EduStaff is a private firm that contracts with districts to provide substitutes. And I think it was a really good meeting. We're going to move forward with them providing their services. I thought it was significant that today they showed a map on the wall, and virtually all around us are districts who have signed on with EduStaff. They have a recruiter, which I think is one of the big challenges that we face, recruiting enough people. And that recruiter lives here in Albany, Oregon. And so we kind of laughed a little bit, and we could tell that that recruiter has probably signed some people up who live here in Albany to work on EduStaff. And so Corvallis is about 6,500 students. They have 100 and, what was it, 120?
I think you said 120, 120 plus.
Yeah, currently. And we have about 9,000 students, and we have about 80. So, and we will let you guys know how many we have as we go in, and then how many we will be able to gather as we make this process. So we'll be bringing a contract for you guys to vote on at the November meeting, and we'll move forward. One of my biggest hangups about it is the idea, as an educator, I always think that it's best to start a new system in the summer because the transition can be generally, you just worry about it being problematic to jump into another boat in the middle of the rapids. But they said that about 50% of the districts that they take over, it occurs during the year. They actually prefer it because they actually have the subs and we can contact them and begin to move them in an orderly transition. So that was a huge concern of mine. And it sounds like we can make this move. Finally, we use Frontline, and it would not change on our end. So our software would not change. They just hook up to it. And so I think there's a lot of things here that make this doable. So we'll meet with them. Heather, do you have something to add?
I do. It's really a partnership. They become the hiring agent, the training agent, and the dispatching agent to this open sub positions that we have. But we keep a connection with all our current subs and our incoming subs. There are still work that they will do with the HR department. We get them into our frontline system. So we'll have Karen Cortez, who is our specialist, still working with them. I see it really as we're not handing everything off, but it's a real partnership to access a larger substitute pool. And those people who are currently subs with us, we walk them through a process of that transition to then begin working through EduStaff. They still sign on to Frontline to get their sub jobs just like they have. So it does not change for the subs. It's more behind the scenes work. And I think it'll be a good partnership. There's just a lot of benefits to it that we'll be getting out to all of our subs who might be listening to our school board meeting or hear about this. We will be getting more information out to everybody, but I do think all around there's going to be more positives as we just get through this process.
So Heather, I had a question. So it sounded like that all of our subs would then be, for lack of a better term, handed over to Frontline, and they would manage our pool.
Correct, EduStaff.
Sorry, I got the,
yeah.
yes, thank you. And obviously for a markup, because companies don't operate in a vacuum?
Well, so there is there's obviously a financial transition and there is a cost for them to do that. But the increase in our substitute pool, so our staff can access substitutes, is what we discussed, that the payoff is worth it. And there is a transition of the whole package for substitutes. There are some benefits with EduStaff that will occur, and we're just going to get those details together. But we're not accessing a current system in place, and we have the EduStaff recruiter who lives in Albany recruiting for our district surrounding us right now.
So would we get access to that entire pool?
Correct.
Is that how that works? So
Correct.
there might be 300 at some point.
They
Pick a
could
number.
log in and pick a sub job from us. They can pick one from Corvallis. We have people, picking other communities. We're going to continue to lean into our relationship with and our connection with and our customer service to people who are subbing for us through EduStaff. That's still important, that they will have contacts within our HR office if they have any questions. We're not cutting that off. That's still a relationship we want to keep with all of our substitutes.
Thank you.
So just timing, we will be signing an acknowledgement that will begin, and then the contract will come to you guys in November.
Okay.
And then I would anticipate they want at least 2 months of transition to coincide with one of their pay dates, so that we don't have a pay period where we're both partly doing it. We want to just take it up to that time, and then we'll release them. And we'll be spending some of that 2 months, we'll be meeting with all of them and recruiting more if we can find them. So we hope that we can make some move. I'm assuming we're going to get a bump just because we have people that live in Albany that are already on the system taking jobs elsewhere. So, and then finally, we have some union business. We've made a couple of moves there, and we've been meeting with them. And I know Heather, Brad, you were there at bargaining the other night, and that process will
And
continue
Michael.
as well.
Michael was there.
Michael was there. And we'll continue to work on, both with the certified and classified union in the meetings that we've established and begun to do some things. A couple of things that have happened. We are going to be moving, I think, pretty quickly to offering straight pay for our co-curricular drivers. We currently are the only district I know that pays straight pay only when they're driving, then minimum wage while they sit at a game, and then return to straight pay. All other districts pay straight pay throughout, and in an attempt to try to get them to sign on for some games, we're critically short there. We will do that. And so I know Helen and Heather are working on that. And we'll have a MOU that was earlier in the summer that we'll be bringing to you as well, which was an increase in pay for mechanic and bookkeepers. And you'll be seeing that here shortly. Another thing we were able to do, we did some analysis and found that the teachers pay step 0 on all columns really is there because it's always been there. And we can find no linkage in that. None of our teachers are paid at step 0. And I was able to talk with Russ Allen about why it was there. And it even predated him. So we will eliminate that step and we'll be just step 1. There's no use for it. And I worry that a teacher looking to come here would look at step 0 and see that as not as competitive. And so we'll be doing that. And other than that, lots going on. I really appreciated the new group that we've put together, DLT Large, which are the directors in here, 4 principals. I think the conversations have been great. And just enjoy them. They're very thoughtful, thought-provoking. Most of my really good thinking is what somebody else says, and so we're able to hear each other. And just really enjoyed how that group's coming together. Yes.
Just a quick correction. You talked about mechanics and bookkeepers, which my staff would be very excited to hear about, but I believe we're talking about mechanics and auto service workers.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I just wanted to, for all of our bookkeepers out there who we greatly appreciate in our district, there
for
is
saving me
not
a-
a current MOU about that.
That's right. It was about position creation earlier in our year. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thought you might be getting some emails of excitement.
Yes, sir.
The straight pay for bus drivers, I think, is a great idea, but it's still refundable from the state to like 75%.
No, that's
70.
co-curricular trips. That would be a co-curricular, it's home to school for school that is the 70% reimbursed.
But the mechanics, the workers, that
Yes,
would be.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
That's all I've got.
Okay, next up, board reports.
If I might, just, you procedurally held me at bay there when you skipped whatever that was, Mr. Chairman, Board Business E. You're pretty slick, and you're not even halfway done through the year. I can't wait to see what the rest of this has to offer. First, I was going to bring a copy of it, but I didn't. There was a pretty good story in the Oregonian yesterday talking about the status of kids and learning and testing and what some of the different school districts are doing to approach that. The Oregonian editorialized a bit in the body of the story itself. McMinnville, I think, was really, the McMinnville School District was really zeroing in on third grade reading, I think. Another example would have been the Beaverton School District, and they are just stay the course, study as you go. And so I think it's important for us to watch what other districts are doing, what's working and what's not, and also to make sure that we're out front with the public on what we're doing. I know at South Albany, I was by there this afternoon, and they've got the Bird's Nest program going that focuses on the high school freshmen incoming. And so, Superintendent Gardner, your thoughts about all of that?
I want to know what the bird is, the bird's nest is.
It's a red hawk. Everything is bird and nest related there.
And I'll turn it over to Lisa for comments here in just a minute. One of the things that most concerns me right now is just the shortage of subs and the shortage of staff that force sometimes us to regroup students, and I think that becomes really difficult to function in. Right? If we have in a given 2 weeks' time 3 absences in first grade at Meadow Ridge, we will send them to other classrooms for lack of subs, and so that can be very disruptive, I think, to kids. Also, we will, and I know we've set some priorities to try to keep people from being pulled out of catch-up classrooms, special ed, things like that, to sub in other classrooms. We're trying to hold that as a priority. But there is a lot of duress there just for lack of bodies. But in terms of what my perception is of school environments, I think that there is good instruction going on at those grades. And Lisa, if you would care to add to that?
Sure. One of the things I know that you had heard about last year as a board, Interim Superintendent Saxton spoke about it, was this multi-tiered systems of support, so this MTSS system. We've had that, we're just in the beginning phases for middle school, and elementary has had it longer. And one of the parts of our strategic plan is a K-12 implementation of that system. That is the best that we know of when it comes to being able to really acutely diagnose reading, for example. What are the skill gaps that a student has, and then filling those gaps. So we're far beyond you're just behind in reading. So you're a third grader, but you're reading at a first grade level. So you're just going to be in the low group. I need to know exactly what about reading is difficult. Is it the silent E rule? Is it digraphs? What is it blends? So for us, it really is the implementation of MTSS systems. And if you were to talk to educators, superintendents around the state, they would point you there. The other that we're pretty excited about is our new ELA curriculum and the focus on foundational reading skills in early grades. It's something that our last curriculum lacked, and so we supplemented with something we call ECRI. It's called ECRI. It's a foundational reading skills curriculum. And so having a curriculum that's aligned K-8, being able to focus on MTSS implementation, and being able to focus interventions diagnostically for students, that's where you make up ground. Because certainly we need to focus on third grade reading, but we can't leave out or leave behind students who are past the third grade who are also behind in reading.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a great response. Can we, and maybe it already is, but if we could post that somewhere so inquiring parents who would want to know, it's boom, that's a lot and it's right there. And
So we have colored handouts, flyers all about MTSS actually back in CIA. I'll make sure that we grab some before we leave here tonight that you can leave with, but getting that on our website I think is an excellent point.
thank you. So my next item, and I guess the change in weather has brought some real urgency to this for me, is the situation with our softball and baseball facilities for kids who participate in those sports. Both of the football fields are field turf. They don't have to be. You can play football in the mud. It's not a requirement. Both schools have improved and beautiful indoor facilities for basketball and volleyball. And as I've said, baseball, softball, really the only sports that you can get rained out. You can't play it in the mud. And we're not up to par in those areas. We've got a group in the community working and nudging me at least to help them get this done. I got, I would describe it as a rough bid, I guess, or estimated cost, that the softball fields would cost about $125,000 a piece per school. At South Albany, there are no batting cages or hitting facilities for the softball team, and there needs to be. I'm not an attorney, but I think there are laws around that issue, that if there are for guys, there are for girls. And I got an estimate there as well, a rough estimate of $250,000. And on the hitting cage in particular, at South Albany, it's my understanding that there are community members willing to donate their times or service or things like that. So 250 would be on the high end. Also in the community, I've got $200,000 in commitments for hard cash donations this year or next year. And then that would take us to the baseball fields. And I think between the two, it's probably in the neighborhood of $750,000. And my source of these estimates are from the guy who did the ball field out at LBCC. He's in the middle of doing fields at Central Lynn. He did the baseball field in Bend for the Bend Elks. So credible guy. And I want to do something. I want us to, by consensus or with the district, or how do we get to a place where we're working with the community to get these facilities going for these guys? It rained today, and I suppose it's not long. We get much further into the winter and we could be rained out and it could be a mud mess, and that might happen to us anyway. But somebody help me get this going here. Where do I have to go? What do I have to do?
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Yes.
So I don't dispute that a turf infield makes the sport doable outdoors under anything but heavy rain conditions. And so it would be great I would just ask that we meet with them, put the athletic directors and the principals in the room and put together a plan. The urgency to do it by next spring, by March, is, I don't know how that can work out. To excavate and to create the field, you will need to move machines. And if you look at like a softball field, The access point would be over the grass that you're going to hopefully play on the next year. When we built fields in Staten, you end up with a need for dirt. Just looking at the West Albany softball field with Don Lean, you have a grade which is moving from, it's a little higher, it looks like, on the first base side of the field, and it drops across. You can kind of see it with the dugouts. They're not even level to the ground, so the ground is sloping. If you lay an infield level, you almost certainly will have some reconciliation to do at some point, meaning you would bring dirt in. If you bring dirt in, you will not have grass on it until it begins to grow very close to the beginning of the season, right? And so you would face then, if you take a tracked excavator in there, if you take dump trucks in and out, you're going to have a challenge with the grass. And then you and I spoke about the absolute fear that I worked under with both the football field in Staten and the softball field of the material not arriving very early, right? So you're at the whim of whether or not they can ship that to you, make it and ship it to you in time. And shortages seem to be the rule. So I have a lot of concern about that. I would love to see the work process, Roger, that they would have. Normally when we begin a construction, we walk through with whoever's going to be the contractor and say, where are you staging? How are you accessing? What will that look like? I don't have any of that. Or who's covering the cost of the curbs, all that, right? So the cash is great, but I don't know what is deliverable here. 2 softball fields, and then I don't know what the costs are in the softball fields, and then what does that commit us to in the next biennium for the baseball fields? And I know you've already thought of some questions, so shoot.
No,
But I would love to meet with them.
But-
We can talk about that.
I'd love to meet, I'd love to get everybody together too, but I want to get it done. And that's just, especially the softball fields, that would seem, at this time, given where we're at, a reasonable attempt. And the feedback I get, and it's why we probably ought to get together with the athletic directors and the programs, is if it's not done in the spring, nothing lost, because most of the year they're having to go to other schools' facilities to play their games.
That's a fair point.
But somebody might say, well, why can't they just do that? It's cheaper to send the bus than, but the problem is they don't get to practice. And so they are at a distinct competitive disadvantage with the situation we have. And for the money and for the money being pledged or donated, I just hope that we, in the next week, could get together and discuss it. And maybe it addresses and meets all your concerns. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe people are aware of the risk. And again, we're not exactly in a great position come springtime. I guess the other question I have is, what is that within your approval levels and criteria? Does the board need to take action, or what do we have to do there? And when do we meet again? If we were to meet this week and you were comfortable, what would need to happen next? And that's a big if, I understand that.
So lots of ifs there. I think I believe that we paid off the football field at South over a long period of time. And I am fairly certain, and someone could correct me, but I think we were still paying on the West field as well. And so that would be one thing I would want us to guard against, right? That we end up with some open-ended commitment that all of a sudden continues to cost us money. The money, had those projects been completed under what they were planned at, I think we could have probably put $500,000 away over the last few years for the next set of carpets there, which we have not in any way saved for. And so that would be one thing I would want us to guard against. I do see your point that, like, if they're going to be on the road anyway because the ground is not playable, I hear that. But I would prefer that we meet with them first and talk about the work process.
Okay.
And we're happy to meet. I think I've already talked with both Bob and Don just around what they need. The other thing is critically important to understand. Lake Oswego had a beautiful baseball field and stadium, and their girls played at a city park, which was the school district did not put any money towards that. And the girls finally came and asked, and they were responded to in a fairly dismissive manner, and they ended up in a lawsuit. And I think the comment that was made at the time was, win a state championship, then we'll talk, right? Something like that. And so it was that more than anything else which showed the district's intent. Don Lean has already met with, I think it's KT Emerson from the OSAA who handles Title IX. And the first thing that they have asked us to do is put a plan together that shows the intent to create equal facilities. And so, and Don even was acknowledging that it would be great to do softball first. So there are things that line up there. But we can put together a meeting.
Okay.
I have a question on that. Was it the intent to fund it completely through donations or just to offset a portion of it?
Well,
I mean, because it was a substantial amount of money, but I mean, I just didn't understand where that was intending to go.
my intention is to get it done. And for $500,000 in projects that are sorely needed that would help our students and our athletes, having the community step up on the onset at $200,000. I mean, I guess my intent would be for the district to commit to the other $300,000. And if we get donations and we get work done and it comes in cheaper than that, great.
Okay, yeah, I just wasn't clear, so. Sorry.
And the city has an abundance of softball fields. If work went over this spring, like they could still practice or play at possibly some city owned fields at Timberland or Bryant Park. Also, I was talking to former board chair Micah Smith not too long ago about the turf fund, and his belief is that we had a turf fund using funds from the cell phone towers that we lease space for, and unfortunately we don't have that fund. It doesn't actually exist.
We do have the cell tower lease, and it's going towards the West Albany debt.
Okay, so it is going to there.
Mhm.
And then when that debt is paid, it still remains a reserve account for.
Yes.
But it's not a significant amount compared with the cost of a field. It's a
Okay.
fairly small amount. It might be $3,000 a month, $2,000 a month.
I think it's about $33,000 a year, and the debt on the field is about $53,000 a year. So the cell phone tower doesn't quite cover the payment. Yeah.
So there was some confusion during the budget hearing last year. Thank you.
Roger, you done? Do you have another
I'll
topic?
never be done with this issue till they're done, but I yield.
Okay. Eric, do you have any
Uh,
board member report issues?
Just to tap on, we did have the first meeting talking with food service people, and very, very educated gentleman from Cascade came over and helped us, and Chris Vasha, he's tip of the spear. Did have lunch with the superintendent at AOS, and just super happy to see kids and staff enjoying school this year. You can see smiles on faces as they go into buildings.
Michael, do you have anything?
No, I just a couple things I participated in. Three of us and the superintendent participated in the OSBA had regional meetings, and it's a kind of a challenge for them right now. What I really go there for right this time of year is to talk about what they're gonna pursue at the legislature, and it's kind of difficult for them to get a handle on it right now with elections, but they did talk about some particular bills they're going to pursue, and that was well. And it was nice to talk to some other districts. I think, we talked about our summer programs. The other districts, that's something that everyone's positive about, is those summer programs. So that was good to hear. And also, myself and Director Wilson attended bargaining last week with the licensed unit. And there's a lot on the table, but I thought there were some good, forthright discussions, and we're making some progress.
Brad?
Nothing to add.
Okay, I also got to visit school, Memorial, which was really nice. Kids are getting back to normal. I think that's great. One of the things I'd like to say is how great it is to be back to more normal activities for the kids. Dances, all that kind of stuff is great. I really do strongly believe all the extracurricular activities are a huge part of our students' development. Our coaches, band leaders, club teachers, play directors, etc., have a very unique and powerful ability to help our youth learn some important lessons for their future success. Thank you to all our staff and volunteers who make a positive impact on our youth inside and outside the classroom. I think one of the best things about kind of getting through COVID is those outdoor classrooms, whether it be the play field or the drama club or whatever, they're back. And I think that's really helpful to our young men and women as they mature. Okay, I believe our student board members, you guys Rochambeau'd last time. I forgot who won, but it was entertaining. Whoever won last time, you're up second.
So I'd like to point out that it's starting to finally feel like fall, which I'm really excited for. I'm someone who does enjoy the rain. Since the last board meeting, we had the PSAT on Wednesday the 12th. This was new for some freshmen and sophomores, but very familiar to the juniors and I believe some seniors. One really amazing thing that has been implemented at West is that announcements are now in English, but then there's also a Spanish interpretation. On Friday the 14th, Director Cervantes came by to speak at the Latinx meeting, and big shout out to Yancy Hernandez from Casa Latinos Unidos. She talked about a job training program for students 14 to 24 to get paid $13.50 an hour to do trainings. And these training sessions are to get experience in a work environment before college or before going into the workforce. The Philosophy Club also had a meeting and started working on ethics. We went over as a whole club looking at moral dilemmas and discussing different conclusions based on utilitarian and deontologist perspectives and debated over it. It was a lot of fun. The West Albany Environmental Club went on a hike on Sunday the 16th in Corvallis, and it was supposed to be a 45-minute mile-and-a-half hike. However, it quickly turned into a 3-hour lost count of miles hike. It was very beautiful though and had an amazing time. Girls and boys basketball open gyms have started. The girls water polo went to Modesto, California on Friday the 14th and placed 5th. West Albany High School and Memorial had a choir concert last Tuesday, the 18th. Youth and Government had their first meeting and it was good to see some new faces. Model UN had their first informational meeting today. Friday night football games, there was Pink Out on the 14th and Frat Out on the 21st. And coming up, West Albany is performing The Play That Goes Wrong November 3rd through 5th, and I believe it's $5 a ticket at the door. And also coming up, November 8th through 17th is the Oleander Initiative trip, which was this really great opportunity that 5 high school students from Albany were chosen to go on a cultural exchange trip to Japan and Korea. So that's everything.
My turn now.
You're up.
Sweet. All right. At South Albany, we have Pink Out going on right now at a lot of the home sports games, just taking over all of the sports, selling t-shirts, raising funds for the Breast Cancer Resource Center here in North Albany. Freshman class selections are in full swing with applications due tomorrow and officers being chosen by the next time we meet. The PSAT happens tomorrow in our library with sophomores and junior AVID students being required to take that and it being open to other students as well. We just had our first in a while, annual club rush with just a big event we held at lunchtime with all our different clubs around campus in order to recruit more members and get out what they're about and just share what they're doing. And additionally, clubs are making progress and getting started on their yearly projects. We have a club actually is trying to see if we can get solar panels at South Albany, which I know they were working with the board in the past to do that. Student council meetings are starting up, and we're trying to make them more expansive and include more people from all over South Albany, so from different clubs and groups on campus, sport captains, club presidents and vice presidents, just representatives from choir or theater, stuff like that as well. Our first meeting of this kind was last Friday, and our next one will be sometime in November or December. Difficult with all the three-day weeks coming up. And for sports, we have volleyball and football are currently ranked 6th in the state, and we have high hopes that our cross-country team will make it to state this year as well, as they placed 3rd in state last year. The teams are playing well, and volleyball is going to playoffs and has a home playoff game very soon. The fall choir concert was last Wednesday at the Albany Performing Arts Center and was led by our choir director, Brett DeYoung. And then theater has a play coming up soon in November. I believe they're doing The Little Mermaid. I'm not certain. And the Career Center and our librarians are working on getting guest speakers just coming in and out throughout the month and entire school year. Today we had Safe Haven come in with a couple of kittens and talk about volunteer opportunities and vet experience opportunities as well. And then that's all for now.
Okay. Next is Age Committee, Community and School presentations. I do not believe we have any. Next up's I, Consent Agenda, Personnel Licensed. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the licensed as presented, personnel license as presented.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Personnel Classified.
I move to approve personal classified as presented.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes from September 26, 22, regular board meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from 9/26/22 regular board meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes from our October 10th, 2022 regular board meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from October 10th, 2022 regular board meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Old business? Budget Committee appointment?
I just wanted to point out to you that Heather Carmichael and Chris Norman agreed to an extended term, so we'll have experienced committee members through 2025.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I didn't think we were extending them to 2025. I thought we were extending them to the end of mine and Michael's term.
So I can clarify, we would have had all committee members ending at the same time. So I contacted Chris Norman and asked him if he would agree to extend his term. So we had 2 and 3 ending separate times.
The board practice is if we're going to extend them that far out, that we open applications to the public if we're going to extend them that far out.
For me specifically, and I can only speak to Heather. I don't think I knew that Chair Norman was up for renewal, but I was specific, I thought, in offering to renew her term. And so that's maybe part of the confusion, but that was at least my intent as a board member as we were discussing it.
The motion on the table was to extend them to the end of Director Thompson and my term was the motion made by the board.
I think that the issue that Jane talks about there is we'd have 5 people turning over, and we don't want to have, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
You can actually only extend a term on 3 years. So you can't just extend a term 1 year. So that was part of it too, is having Ms. Carmichael fulfill the complete 3-year term, because that's how you have to appoint him, is in 3 years, not 1 year at a time. So.
Yeah. like I said, if we're going to extend people into 2025, it's been our board practice to open interview process and bring people from the public.
Just as a point of order,
Go ahead.
I went back to the minutes of 1010 that were just approved by the board to try to see, and I think part of the confusion is there was an original motion by Director Aganaga, and then there was an amendment to the motion as I read the minutes. And the amendment to the motion was a request to invite Heather Carmichael to apply for another term in the current position. The motion was requested to amend by Director Nyquist. Director Thompson seconded the motion, and it passed unanimously.
So it seems like Heather's is fairly cut and dry. Is that right? Because she would then get the 3-year that we can appoint them for, right? And then the other question I think is open, Eric.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer, and we worked a long time on making sure that there was open channels for people to apply on the budget committee, and we were not going to automatically extend a term that we're.
Well, I agree. I'll second what Director Okanaga is talking about. I believe that was the discussion. And I believe on 1010, our discussion was focused on Heather Carmichael. And so, I mean, that's my sense, is that our whole discussion was extending her. Yes or no? We didn't know. That was the question. We didn't know what her plans were. And so I think we have that answer. And
So I think part of the issue, excuse me, Michael, didn't we, was that there's a timeline on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was, it's like coming to the end of the timeline.
Yeah, and so the option would be that the question about Heather,
right,
could be solved, you know, with action. And then I think the other one is at the disposal of the board as to looking at the upcoming, you know, heavy turnover and what to do about that.
So I want to go back to, I guess, the spirit of the conversation, at least it was for me. And we're coming out of COVID. We're coming out of a time where a lot of federal and state dollars were injected into our budget to do special and different things. That activity is now subsided. And for me, there's just a premium on experience. And so you can model it however you want to have whatever practices and processes you want. For me, I want the most knowledgeable, most talented people we can have going into this next budget year. And the other part of that is we probably aren't out of the tough decisions and revisiting some pre-COVID and during COVID decisions to be able to make maybe differently with different, now that there are different needs and, you know, some different goals and the focus on getting kids caught back up. So sorry if I overstepped, at least from my intent, previous practice, but it just, to me, makes practical sense to reappoint both of these members to an additional 3-year term. And I would make a motion to do that.
Okay. Do I hear a second? Okay, so it sounds like we're gonna, but Jane, we need this like now, right?
We're still okay.
Okay,
The concern is just having people schedule their time, you know.
right, I understand. So overall, Michael and Eric, would you be more comfortable if we opened it up and take applications? Or, I mean, so one of the things we're trying to achieve here is the not have everybody leave at the same time. That's really the biggest thing we're trying to achieve, right? People can be appointed to 3 years. They can resign during that 3 years, but unfortunately, to how timing has gone, it's going to set up right now that all 5 are going to leave at the same time. That's a bad situation. We don't want that. Go ahead, Chris.
Part of what's created with Chris is that somewhere in the 3 newest positions, someone was appointed beyond a year beyond where they should be, or a year less. And so we have 4 that would expire at the end of June of next year. And we would have 1 remaining, which would be Heather in this sense, if you appointed her. You should have 3 that expire and then 2. And in looking back at it, we could not trace back to which person it was that has the incorrect term. So you really need them to be in a staggered sense of 3 and 2 and be appointed for 3-year terms.
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to have the district open applications for the two terms that are expected to expire, and set up an interview process. We already have questions and everything that the district has done. And I do appreciate Director Nyquist's operational knowledge, but the budget has looked different every time. It is a different jacket we put on every time.
So can I?
Go ahead,
can I
Roger.
speak to- Well, first, this board already voted at last board meeting to invite one of the 2 board members to reapply. And she did, and now we're not going to accept it? I'm not voting for that.
You actually can leave, you could appoint Heather and then leave Chris's term, and then you could solve that next year with the 4 that are gonna expire at the end of 2023. So you could have your budget committee for this year. Chris's term does not expire until the end of 2023, so the June 30th of 2023. But then you have 4 board members, or 4 budget committee members that their terms all expire. We were trying to not have that by the Chris extending his. So, I mean, that would be an option to vote yes on Heather, appoint her, and then address it in the next. Yeah.
Is that a satisfactory? Okay, so can I hear a motion on that? Because then we can have Chris reapply, which I think there's some of us who just would be good with that. But I agree with going along with the process. I also agree with what Roger said. We already approved the other thing. So let's vote on that. Can I hear a motion?
So I move to approve Heather Carmichael for a extended term through 2025. Is that? Yeah.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And we're going to be in agreement that we're going to have applications next year, and we'll look at that for Chris, which will fill the gap. And really what we're trying to do is procedurally do this correct. And everyone can agree upon that, right? That we need to open this up as much as possible. We've stood by what we said we were going to do. So, okay, moving forward. Reports. K1 is Division 22, and Ms. Harlan.
Yeah, thank you. Chair Morse and members of the board, in your board packet, you have the report on compliance, known as Division 22. It's required this year a little differently by November 1st. Typically, it happens in the spring. And these are all of the standards that are adopted by the State Board of Education in Oregon by rule. One of the things I'd like to note, a few things actually. First, in your board packet, any of the underlined blue text is a link. So you can open the link if you want to know exactly what that means or what that requires. I'll call your attention to 3 areas that are not in compliance for us at the district. One would be the physical education requirements. I know Interim Superintendent Saxton spoke to you about that last year, but we are out of compliance with the minutes in elementary and middle grades for PE daily. We are also out of compliance for our programs and services for TAG students, only in that the tag requirements, there are new tag requirements that were issued by the state. And so we'll update our tag plan to include and align with those new requirements. And the last would be our ELA, our required ELA curriculum adoption. Last year was a required year for K-12. We applied for the waiver for 9 through 12, and that was approved, and we'll complete that this year, but you'll see that noted here as well. All of the other areas and categories are in compliance, and then there are a few that were waived. A reminder that these standards are, this Division 22 report is for last school year. So it's for the 21-22 school year. And then I'll take any questions.
Could you speak to the physical or PE requirement? I know we have, but
Yeah.
just for the public to understand it.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we have had on the legislatively on the books maybe for about 7 or 8 years. PE is the only content area that we have legislation. Actually, I don't know of any other state that has legislation that requires the amount of PE minutes for elementary and middle. For elementary, it's 30 minutes every day. And for middle school, it's 45 minutes every day. Those requirements have been have been waived every single year for the last 6 or 7. And this would be the first year that Division 22 requirements for this specific physical education requirements would be in effect. We have 30 minutes of PE every day at the elementary school. We have it actually 3 times a week, but we also include music and art. At the middle school level, we have PE 45 minutes every day, but we do take students out of physical education for health. And the middle schools do that differently in terms of timing, and that's why we are not in compliance. We don't anticipate that this requirement will be a longstanding one or will remain, but this would be the first year that we're reporting Division 22 with that PE requirement not waived for districts.
Go ahead, Roger.
It's been a long time, but I think I was at the Capitol that during the hearing that created this requirement, and it was by a senator from Corvallis named Cliff Trow, and he meant serious business. So is it, I think it's still in statute as it was passed. And so what I'm hearing is that we're not going to meet the statute and we're just not going to meet it. And that's okay?
I would defer to the superintendent on that, but I know last year it was around staffing. And I would come back to the board in terms of approving budgets for staffing. So not only would it be staffing more teachers for PE, but also for the other things that happen during that PE time. So at the middle school level, it would actually be health teachers. And at the elementary level, it would be taking music and art out of that time and putting it somewhere else. Mm-hmm.
So I would just add, Roger, I believe that Senator Courtney, whose wife is a PE teacher, was the true author of that. And when the law was passed, I believe in 2007, it was delayed in its implementation until 2013. And we went through the Great Recession and we were all just barely at survival. And his question that year to the committee led by Morgan Allen, I don't know if you know Morgan Allen, he's a OSBA, now COSA lobbyist. His first question was, what have you been doing? And we said, we've been surviving the Great Recession, because he kind of had the idea that we should have planned this all out. There are ways that we can do this that don't necessarily mean. So for example, we've already heard that we need a bunch of Chromebooks, right? You guys heard that about a month and a half ago. If we go out and we say, okay, now we need a bunch of PE teachers, are they going to be available for every district in the state? Because this is, since 2007, the first year when we've actually had to report on this, because each year Senator Courtney was lobbied to ease the requirements or put it off for another year. And we have had a decade and a half of not addressing the law as written, even though it was passed.
If I could, for middle school specifically, this example might help. So if we had no interruption to physical education minutes at the middle school level, students would receive their health instruction during a different time. The time that would come is at the cost of electives, because that's the time that you have. So it would be a matter of hiring health teachers in addition to or in lieu of some of the electives that students have at the middle school level. So going from 2 electives or to 1 or to 1.5. So there are certainly ways that it can be done, but it will not be done without additional staffing.
Well, I don't mean to channel President Courtney's wife or the good Senator Troe, but what's more important than kids' physical health? Especially coming out of COVID, everybody's been laying around too much. And so we're into a school year, and I guess I understand we can't make substantive changes to what we're doing right now, but going forward.
Oh, going forward, that's what Lisa's talking about.
Okay.
A plan.
Well, so if I'm to understand right, going forward, we will meet it.
Yes, we'll have to, unless the law is eased, which Lisa spoke about. And it could be eased in some manner over the course of the spring.
Andy, just for kind of a overall conceptualization for people, how many districts do you think are meeting this requirement?
So hard to tell at this point because everybody has been able to avoid having to report on it. But as we move forward, we'll be learning from other districts. Some districts, short of gym space, for example, are having to figure out how they're going to do that. At elementary level, a guided recess with required movement is one way that they can do that. And we'll certainly need to look at all of those as we look at a budget which may have less revenue. You know, the idea that we would just simply add a bunch of teachers to this in the midst of cutting, you know, other elements of the budget is going to be challenging. And the number of people to be hired will be challenging.
Is it fair to say less than 50% are meeting this?
Yes.
I would say there are very few. When I talk to my
Fair to
colleagues around the
say
state,
less than 25% are meeting this?
very few.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And we're going to move towards it.
Yeah, and certainly
unless the requirement
also,
changes.
And we will see also, as this requirement is in effect, we will see lobbying to change the rule as well.
You might see lobbying not to change the rule.
I think the committee that has informed Senator Courtney over the years is very entrenched that this is the most important thing. We might argue third grade reading, right? So there are a lot of things to accomplish in a 6-hour student day.
Okay, any more questions on Division 22?
Well, we've known about this for a long time, and we've reported for like the last 3 or 4 years that we were in compliance with it. And this is my third superintendent doing this rodeo with PE time. Sue Luthra said in 2019 we were going to mark uncompliant. I have an email, it says in writing that we're going to mark uncompliant. I gave you the email, in fact. We've known about this for a very long time, and we're out of statute, and I rest.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Lisa.
We've never reported that we were in compliance. What happens, just like on the Division 22 report that you see here, is it will say waived, or it doesn't appear on the Division 22 at all. So for example, there were 2 things that were waived in the 21-22 school year. And the required report will say that. So assessment for essential skills was waived in the 21-22 school year, as was kindergarten assessment.
Mr. Chair, I love to share some documents with you. I've already shared them with the superintendent where they literally say in compliance, even where the year where it says it was waived. We reported in compliance. The superintendent has all the paperwork. I would be happy to share it with the rest of the board. It's on the district website. Thank you.
I guess at this point, we are where we are, and thanks for the backup in the back looking years, and it just gives us that much more motivation going forward to do what we can with what we have.
Thank you.
Okay, K-22 student enrollment. Jane.
Yeah, the report that I have gave you is a comparison based on average daily membership, and that is one of the ways we are paid for our students. So it takes into account the attendance of students. And you can see on the last page that we are below our budgeted count. And we're below, it equals about $1 million in basic school support. But also I want you to know September is the time period that the first quarter is based on. And many of the students maybe come late, so it's not the number of students in the seat, but the total days they are in the seats. And so the second term, which ends December, numbers usually increase. So when I see the million that is below our basic school support budget, I won't take any action at this time. In December, we'll look at the numbers, and we have the right to contact ODE and say, adjust our payments so that we're not stuck with paying funds back. And so I'll bring that back to you in December.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that I've really appreciated, Andy, that you've been doing lately in the Parents Squared is it's really important for our students to come to school, right? But if you're absent, that's not helping your learning. You know, you're not catching up in your learning. Please, parents, students, time to come to school. We need to learn. If you're not at school, you're not going to be a success, unfortunately, in the future. And we want you all to have successful lives. Andy, it looked like you had something to say.
Well, I just want to give Michelle Steinhobel, our communications director, the full credit for the complete authorship of that.
Yes.
But I like that you thought
Well
you
done.
did it.
So I have a question. So if we're down $1 million, what are we down enrollment wise? How many students does that represent?
9,100.
Okay, and so we had.
We're down 107, excuse me. 9,122.
I was with you. What were we pre-COVID?
9450.
Yes,
What were we last year? Have we come up from last year?
we did. Came up slightly. So we came up 40 students. If you compare October to October from last year at this time, we are 40 students up.
One of the things kind of history-wise for this is our district didn't go down as much as many districts percentage-wise for how many students left. But
Yes.
not as many are coming back now either because we never lost them. But still, our predictions weren't as, hopefully it'll turn out as Jane says, but right now it looks like we're going to lose money compared to what we thought. So we're hopeful that won't happen.
So Jane, can you talk a little bit when we will begin to see both of those? So in other words, our enrollment projected fiscally and then our share of the state pool, because other districts are gaining a few more students. We should be able to see that. And when would that become visible?
That also is in January. All of the schools report in December, and then we receive that information back.
So that'll be
And
a
it-
big piece of information that we need to start projecting against.
Okay.
It could
Thank you.
cause the amount we're paid per student to increase. What I've heard is Portland, Beaverton, the large districts are not receiving the students back. Smaller rural schools are. And so they are predicting that the amount we receive per student could increase.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bond business reports. And Mr. Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll have Skip review the end-of-month report.
Chair Morris, members of the board, just give you some highlights from the September end-of-month report for capital projects. So the transportation facility received all their electrical equipment and preparing for building energization in October. So that's an exciting milestone for that project. And then also the at West Albany High, the 2 restroom projects did open up for school. And then the 3 elementary school modular classroom projects at North Albany Elementary School, Waverly Elementary School, and South Shore Elementary School all opened up for students. And then the board did approve construction start for South Shore Elementary School, 8 classrooms. So they are breaking ground for that project. And then also reported in September was just a continuing of Central Elementary School design. And that was for the ventilation upgrade. So that was happening in September also. Any questions? I know we've got Central Elementary School next on the agenda.
So Skip, I have a couple questions. Are we now fully billed out on Waverly and Nays, or is there still more to come in there?
We're closing out the project, which means any remaining contingency that was not spent will come through as a final change order for each of those projects. And so we are seeing a credit coming back. We're just still finalizing those numbers.
Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
So tell me about Central Elementary School design.
So we did finish the design development work. And we did receive cost estimates, and I reported that to district leadership. And not sure how we were going to report that out, Superintendent.
So they're aware of the costs that show in the budget. Can I take the liberty of pointing to you guys to this sheet? I think you guys have it. And so,
Okay.
Before you do, I have a question. If you might. So the design development work were done to what specs?
We had a feasibility study performed with the goal of providing ventilation. And so we used the district standards as well as hired consultants to perform a design. And we consulted State Historic Preservation Office, and also on our team was a contractor as well as abatement consultant to work through kind of a three-prong attack for that design. And so we ended up with a scope of work, and we estimated it with two different parties. And both parties ended up estimating the project very close to each other. Did that answer your question?
Well, kinda. I thought that last May we talked about design build, where contractors or subs would come up with their own design.
So we took feasibility to design development, so we would understand what the scope needed to be. And so it was not a full design. And so our goal was to finish design enough where we understood where the cost was going and come back with a cost and a schedule and a recommendation for a contract methodology, one of which was going to include design build. And that's what our intentions were to do by tonight.
And if I could perhaps frame that, we presented to the board on Superintendent Gardner's recommendation that we do spend some money to get more precise numbers to make sure that with cost escalations, we didn't get ourselves into a position where we're making decisions outside of an awareness of escalation. And so the investment to get more refined numbers was made, and you're seeing the results of those more refined numbers than earlier rough order of magnitude estimates.
So I don't, I'm ready to launch here, but I better wait.
For everyone's, we're talking, if I recall, it was just a text or an email. So what we thought we could do with our 2.8 that we approved has now become 6 million. Should we put that on the table so everyone, I just want everyone to understand what we're talking about here. The numbers got wildly increased.
So Skip, what is the significant difference between Soderstrom's methodology and the methodology used as with a closer look, obviously, but I think that's what the board and myself are having the big struggle with, that has, so Soderstrom, when they did that analysis, it was April, May?
I think it was
I have it right here. It's like February. Dated February
yeah.
2022, which may be part of the issue. I don't know.
So I guess the real question is, even if you allow that, so they presented a rough order magnitude, and then you have construction costs increase, like that 20% would be tough to keep up with, but this is 100%, and a little bit more. And so the question is, what are the significant changes in the methodology that either caused Soderstrom to miss, or this, if they're dead accurate, then how is this so expensive? I guess that's the real
So
question.
if I put myself in your shoes, we had a feasibility study performed with a scope of work, and that scope of work was costed cost estimate. That cost estimate was based off of a cost per square foot. So there was some level, I wasn't involved in the study personally, but there was some level of effort put into what that scope was going to be. But in the end, the cost was based off of a cost per square foot, which is a ROM cost. And so any design construction project, we would take it to the next level of further design and then cost it at that point. Now the cost is going to be better. So industry, economy, cost maybe some of what the increase was, but it's majority just going from a very high level cost per square foot to an actual design development document where they're taking distance takeoffs and applying now a cost per lineal foot of piping, of ductwork, of actual penetrations, of actual what a air handler costs and how many air handlers we're putting in there. So that's the kind of detail we have now. I would say that on our team for the contractor costs, we did choose a mechanical contractor that does do design build. They have active design builds in play right now. And so we wanted to make sure that when we got two costs in, one from the architect and cost estimator, and then one from the contractor, that it was coming from the perspective of somebody who's in that field and knows that field as well. So with the tools that we have, the bad news is the costs are high. The good news is we now know what the costs are before the district makes further investment in the project.
I got to challenge that. We don't know what the costs are because we haven't put out to bid and the market hasn't responded.
That would just take more investment, and that's a district decision.
So in helping you guys reach the decision, I would direct you guys to the sheet here. And there are missing details here, but you guys can see the ESSER 2 grant, which is at the top in the box, $7 million. And there are other expenditures in that box that are not accounted for there. You can see that $828,000 was spent on Waverly Elementary and $430,000 was expended on North Albany Elementary. And if you go down to ESSER 3, which is the remaining sheet, you can see that we began with $15,734,000. Between that and where it says balance remaining, there is about $3 million expended on summer school and some other things, and those have yet to be cleaned up. We end up with $12,542,000 in ESSER 3. And you can see below that Waverly, even though we had $828,000 expended on it in ESSER 2, actually cost $2,080,000 by the time we completed. So that is up $1.2 million from ESSER 2 now finding a home in this budget. When you take a look at North Albany Elementary, it has a total cost of just over $1 million, $1.044 million, and so $613,000 now flow into ESSER 3. And South Shore has a remaining balance now of $6.2 million. And when you total all those up, subtract them from the $15 million and summer school and other things already expended, there's $4.47 million remaining. That does not count this or any of the other things that currently rest in ESSER 3, and we can bring you back in November a complete accounting of what's in that budget and what further is planned for that. So 4.4 million versus the costs you see here, that would force us to, and I worry, and it's more about the industry, Skip, it's not you, but if we were to say yes to this, it would be the starting point, and I will take the over. So I do not recommend that we pursue this. And any questions that you have, I just feel like this ends up in the general fund where we are trying to find Chromebooks, and it's just a number that is untenable, knowing what we know about the state's general fund budget coming up.
It's just so
It's just so disappointing.
So-
You know, I mean, this went up like 110%. You know, I mean, how are we supposed to make decisions when you can't count on, I mean, not even sort of count on it, but it's over double when we initially looked at it, less than a year ago, 8 months ago. That's just crazy.
Mr. Chairman, I would just add one more thing. The idea that we do not take this project on at this time does not mean that we do not have an obligation to Central to continue to look for creative ways to improve that building, improve the experience for kids. And I would recommend that we do a couple of community meetings with this information in hand and take some input as well there and look for the best solutions we can for that building as we go forward.
I have a couple of questions. So on the top SR2 grant, it says the grant is almost fully expended. I think you mentioned what a projection number that it's not spent. Is it 10 grand? Is it 100 grand? What?
It's about 150,000 left in SR2.
So can we apply that 150,000 to any of these other projects that are in SR3?
Some of it is dedicated to FTE.
That is unspent, Jane?
Yes.
Well,
As those end, they will need to find a place in the general fund.
that y'all want to revisit that budget appointment stuff as it's in here. So I'll leave that alone. But look, and so refresh my memory about the Taquina Elementary $3 million.
I'll start, you help me out. So when those came out, the state allowed districts to apply to use these funds spend ESSER money for facility projects. And so Taquina Elementary was applied for at $3 million. That was the original plan, I think, to create a single school at Taquina. But the original ask was $3 million. And I think the original ask, help me out, Jane, was it $1 million for Waverly and North Albany? 1.5?
Yeah, it was roughly $830,000 for Waverly and, well, yeah, I think it was about $1 million for Waverly. I think it was in the 600,000 range for North Albany Elementary.
So Roger, all of them were requested at a time when construction costs less.
So as a matter of process, did we approve a project for $3 million at Taquina? And is that project on the board? Is that, or was that just part of the anticipated desire to build a bigger facility at Taquina?
I believe that's what it was.
Yeah. The board and before the 2021 elections didn't approve it, but kind of agreed to, we're going to go down this path. But we never, this board never approved.
And Roger, I just want to make clear, there are two approvals we're talking about. Whether the board approved it, is what Michael's talking about. That was the state approving the use of ESSER funds, which is a different approval.
I understand. So let me go back just a minute. How big is Central School? What's the square footage?
I can find that. I'll be able to get it for you. Didn't-
So let me just take a stab at it. 30,000 square feet?
I believe it's roughly 43,000.
Okay, 43,000 square. Why does it cost $6 million to install 40,000 square feet of HVAC? I talked to a contractor, I talked to an HVAC guy, I talked to an architect today, and it literally didn't pass the laugh test with him. So what is it about this project that moves it way beyond the fold of what people are generally seeing out there in the way of contracting? Is it because it's old and it's all of the mitigation that has to happen before we can run ductwork? I mean, I'm dying to know.
Yeah, so it is an old building. Normally, when we build a new building, we centralize the air handling equipment and we centralize the heating equipment, and we run all the infrastructure ahead in the right sequence. In this case, for this building, we are installing an air handler in each classroom. We are having to bring the power and the hydronics to each classroom. And then we're also needing to ventilate in and out of each classroom. And so it has actually been quite a challenging design to work with Preservation Office, try and keep the facade the way it is. We can't put anything up on the roof without shoring up structural all the way down to the ground. So those are the challenges. We actually had to pivot several times during design in a very short 5-week period. And even with these numbers, I would hope we could bring them down. But it's the kind of project from a design and construction perspective that, especially with the number of capital projects that you've seen with costs coming in, nobody's going to want to commit to anything lower than that until a team can get into it, just because of the surprises that would come out. So we tried to minimize the surprises during this effort. We actually did exploratory investigation. We did abatement evaluation. So it's an energy efficient, high ventilation with a building that was not designed to have high ventilation in it. And so it's just a tough part.
Can you elaborate just a little bit on the challenges with the historical building part and then the exterior walls? Was that a seismic concern that didn't allow you to penetrate that at all?
No, so Historic Preservation Office does want to keep the historic outside facade primarily. We actually, timeliness of response was a challenge for us, and so we stayed away from doing that. So we put all the air handling equipment up on the roof with a very high structural design requirement for that. We did find out after further conversations with the Preservation Office that we could change maybe a window out here or there with some louvers, or maybe we could take advantage of the existing ventilation. If you look at the outside of the building, there's actually small slots in the brick. So if we increase those maybe by 4 times, maybe a little bit larger, and bought some special louvers, we might be able to take advantage of those. And that's kind of where we're sitting right now. The registry would change, not to remove it as a historical building, but the district would have to create a report of how the building now has changed now that we've added ventilation and then added louvers to the outside. That's what I've learned.
Okay, so for me, we voted to spend $2.8 million on that building and on that facility, thinking that we were accomplishing some important things for students there. My position at the moment, my thought is that we voted and that hasn't changed. What has changed is the projected costs. And so I would submit to the board that we ought to go back and see what we can accomplish for $2.8 million.
Did you say the square footage? I don't know if I caught that, or do we?
Roughly 43,000.
43,000, okay.
43,500 if you want the report
I
number.
got 43,770.
But I mean, so on a per square foot base, what's that? What do we spend in it? But
Well, it's $100 a square foot.
I don't even need to go back there, but I don't find, and as we get into fall and we get into colder weather and the air exchange requirements as a result of COVID, I don't find doing nothing acceptable. I don't find going back on my word as acceptable. Now, there are new things that have come up. We know more than we knew, I guess, then. But it doesn't change that we made some level of financial commitment. And the question is, what's the best value today for the taxpayers and what's in the best interest of the kids?
You know, I've made my feelings known about this. You know, I don't know what we could do for 2.8 right now based on this. I just want to point out that 2.8 was like a compromise out of the 5 million or so that this report said would get us to a K through 5. And now that would, based on this, that 5 million would probably be 15 million. I would guess, something like that. So, you know, what we can get for 2.8 under this, as you've described it, I don't know. But yes, I like the phrase, we got to do, and maybe trite, but we got to do right by the kids, that we don't talk enough about that, the kids and their parents. As a parent who dropped my kid off at, when it was 35 degrees out last year when the windows were open. You know, I talk to people, I don't think there are very few other schools or buildings. This is a building. The school is Tahkeena Central combined. There are 259 if you combine them. That'd be one of our lower elementary schools. I want to keep that on the focus too. It is one school. But I just don't think, I think we'd see a lot more parents if it were one of our regular size elementary schools that had windows open when it's 35 degrees out. And we just don't, because it's a small school and it's a Title I school. So, but to get back, I love the phrase, we got to do right by the kids. So if we can do something for 2.8, I'm all for that. And I just want to add, there were some smaller projects listed, improvements on the wall ramps. Are those still possible? And I can't remember, maybe some improvement in the cafeteria area, the cafeteria area. I wouldn't even call it a cafeteria.
I think Skip has a breakout a little bit, because
Yeah,
we had
we can
asked
get
that to be
something out of
broken
this.
out.
Yeah.
Those costs are included and they were combined less than 100,000, those two items in the budget.
Well, at least some good news. We can at least get that, I think.
I don't know, and go ahead.
Well, you both said we want to do right by the kids, and I agree with that statement. I think that's why we're all here, right? That's why we all ran for school board, and we want to do that. I question if that's the right place to spend the money, to do right by the most children. My dad went there. We all have a love for the building. However, it may not continue to be serviceable for students. And we have to, unfortunately, take a realistic look at that. I'm not saying that we need to throw it away tomorrow, but we're talking about a significant amount of money to fix that when we might be able to build new for the same money or less and house more students more comfortably. I just believe that we need to be able to take a look at both sides of that and then come back, because, and we've danced around this, I know, for a while since we've been here. And it's kind of, do we all go to Tahkeena? Do we do Tahkeena and Central? How do we make this work? But we have to face the reality that we have limited funds. And then we have to utilize that to best service our students. And so I think if we come at it from that perspective and look at our options, I think we'll come to the right decision.
I like to hear that too. I think there's different timelines. I think we continue, and this landed on our desk, but the idea that Central was degrading inside the building, not outside the building, and certainly not, thanks to state grants, certainly got seismic and got the elevator. Those were taken care of, but inside the building, that issue, that complaint, we had the entire staff came and told us that. But that was talked about in the community for years, for decades. So I think the long-term timeline is certainly headed in that way. When we get numbers like this and reports like that, I think what we're trying to be focused on is that 2.8 is trying to help right now, the 120 students right now. I think that's what's before us. But I'm glad to hear you say that, because that changes I think that's a good way to look at a big picture, and that needs to, the community needs to hear that we're headed that way.
So we it's been a year. It took 6 months of homework and research to get to a place where we agreed on and voted to do something. Now here we are 6 months later. The 35 degrees that Michael's talking about will be here in weeks. You all walk into Costco. It's pretty cold outside, and you walk in and there's this big radiant heater, and then it gets warmer. I just think it's easy for me to say. Well, it's really not easy for me to say. We need to continue to look outside the box at what we can do to make the best situation we can for those kids and the school right now. And I voted for $2.8 million for that facility, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I don't know procedurally. I suppose procedurally what would need to happen is there would need to be a vote taken to not spend the money and not do the project. And I'm not making that motion.
I don't think that project is viable anymore. With the money that we allocated, the original scope of work can't be completed. So we would have to have an amended scope of work.
You would, you're right.
Yeah. So I mean, we'd have to relook at the project and where you want to take that 2.8 and what do you want to throw it at. And that's...
Or something less than that. It wouldn't necessarily have to be 2.8.
Yeah.
If we could avoid the situation where it was 50 degrees in classrooms and it was something less than 2.8, we ought to scrub as many concepts as there are out there and see what comes back to us.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable.
We'll pursue that, Roger.
Okay. So we're going to come back to this.
Well, Pete,
Again and again.
Go ahead, Eric.
you know, Rob threw that Takina thing in here with us as a contingency plan. That $3 million when we told the state, like, hey, we might spend the money on this. It was a contingency plan. I don't know what modulars are costing these days, but we've been buying a few of them. Modulars a lot of times have built-in bathrooms. They have air conditioning and heating. The 2.87 doesn't actually buy us air conditioning for Central, which at the last board meeting, we all got letters about how hot it is.
They were good letters.
They were good letters. So that was a concern to me. I was like, hey, we're doing all of this major work and we're not including air conditioning, because while it's 35 degrees sometimes, it's 95 other times, and some of those older windows are hard to open. So I don't know if it's going to be a lot less money than that 2.8 or 6.8. But what the feasibility of putting modulars at Takina and not ever getting rid of Central. We'll find a use for that school 100%.
Yes.
And kids will always go to that school. But it may be a bond project in a couple of years. And I think we're still doing something good for the kids if we're able to afford modulars and just do one school for now. And Central's not going anywhere. Kids are always going to go to Central.
I think I can speak for the staff, I feel confident in saying they would like one school. It is one school, and they would like it at one building, and that's Takina. I feel like I'm not out of line by saying that. And that $3 million Takina, that was a project more like South Shore's 8 classrooms that were modulars, but they were stick built into the building. So classical, and I know modulars are expensive, but that, you know, it'd be a lot less than that 3 million back then.
Director Thompson and the entire board bring up some really good points, and I do think an interesting data point is looking at the South Shore stick build right now that we've approved for roughly $6.6 million to add 8 classrooms stick build at the South Shore site. So if you're evaluating options, I think that's an interesting data point with some relatively contemporary numbers.
But we couldn't even reach that. We don't have the cash to, if we decided to build 8 classrooms and it cost, you know, that much money, we couldn't do that at Takina. We don't have the money.
There are other types of, you know, modulars. That's a stick-built number.
But
right?
that ended
So-
up being cheaper, if I recall. We changed because it was cheaper to stick build than it was to bring in modulars there.
That is correct.
Yeah.
There's a slight correction. It was cheaper to build the stick built than to do a factory built
The
building.
tilt up, right.
Right. So a
Forgive me.
modular would be
Yes.
less expensive than the factory
Important,
built.
yes.
Yeah. Similar to maybe Waverly. If you set something up like Waverly, it's going to be less, probably over 3 at this point, but it'll be less than the 6.
Okay, thank you.
The same number of classrooms, are you assuming the same number or 2 less? I think the number of students will be
So
different.
112 students, so divided by 30, how does that work? Is that 4-ish classrooms? Is
So
that
we have
how-
2 per grade level, but we also have classrooms for special education and other things. So
Okay.
it would be about 8.
8 classrooms?
Mhm.
Okay, all right. So Waverly was 3. So some reference points there for you.
Okay, so Superintendent, you're going to do some research on that?
We'll look at other options at Central
Okay.
in the meantime, and we'll work as well on a number at Takina as well. 6,
Okay.
7, 8.
Okay, M, new business. Any new business to be discussed? Future agenda items? Other business? Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn?
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.